Hey guys, let's talk LEDs again, and this time we're going to run some tests between the currently most popular variants of digitally addressable LEDs out there. Do they all use the same amount of power for the same brightness? What are the pros and cons of the specific types? Well, let's find out. So today we're going to compare 5 different strips. We have WS2812B, WS2812B Eco, SK6812, APA102, and those are all 5V digitally addressable LED strips. And then I've also thrown in some 12V WS2815 LED strip just to see how well that will do in comparison. First, we're going to do an in-depth look at the results and compare these different LED chips. If you'd rather skip that and go straight to the conclusions and recommendations, check out the jump links in the description. There you can also find the links to the LED strips I've tested in this video. Okay, first some generic information about the tests. Most LED strips are 5 meters or 16 feet variants with 60 LEDs per meter and or have about 300 LEDs in total. Because most strips are 5V, I made sure to inject power at the beginning of the strip, the middle of the strip, and, well, the end of the strip. Even when running 5V full RGB white, that should make sure there isn't any significant voltage drop, so we're testing the actual LED chips in their ideal condition. Most LED strips except for the APA102 have been sourced from BTF lighting. Again, link to all these strips in the description. Oh, here is a shot of the testing setup. All tests have been run using one of these QuinLED-Dig-Uno boards and the same 5V or 12V power supply. The QuinLED-Dig-Uno is a DIY board I've created, which you can build, well, yourself. It's DIY. There will also be pre-built versions available in the future. I just did a test run of those and that went really well, so I'm making more, but more about that in future videos. The little controller board allows you to easily control digitally addressable LED strip like the ones in the video today. It has some added features such as an onboard fuse, a level shifter, making sure your LED installation runs correctly, and well, too much to mention here, this video isn't about that. Again, I'll have a link in the description to my website and everything about LEDs and my controllers, so take a visit on quinled.info. Right, so the data. First, let's quickly take a look at some comparison shots of all the LED strips. I don't have a really good lux meter, so we're going to do this by comparing similar shots with, well, manual settings on the camera, so you can compare the shots of each LED strip. Now, keep in mind that they weren't hanging exactly at the same place or turned around the same way. So, well, although these shots are nice to compare, yeah, it's the best I could do for now. As I said, since it's really hard to judge from a picture, basically, to my eye, most LED strips tested today showed about the same light output. The biggest exception, though, was the APA102 strip. That chip looks noticeably brighter than the other chips I tested. Only the RGBW SK6812 with all channels turned on, so including the W, comes close but still is a bit less in brightness overall. But as I said, most other strips are actually pretty comparable in regards to light output. Maybe the Eco is a little bit less and SK6812 is a little bit brighter, but not by much. So there are some differences, but let's see in the sheet and look at the results to see how much power they use to achieve, well, this almost the same output level. Okay, during testing I've built the following sheet. I'll make sure to link it again in the video description in several different formats so that anyone looking for the information can use it. I'll be posting updates to it over time, but I'll make sure to use the same link so you can always know what link to go to. I've tried to color code the sheet in best performer and worst performer for every given test, But I've split that up between 12 volt and 5 volt because, well, they're really different voltages and it's just a different class, I guess you could say. To make sure all measurements are correct, I've also included just the power supply idle usage and the power supply plus the QuinLED board idle power usage. That way, you know, especially at very low wattages, that it's most often the idle power of the power supply consuming as much as the readout is, instead of the LEDs themselves. I'm using AC measurements because I can measure that most accurately. In the end, when comparing this in the same sheet, in this sheet, and using the same power supply, it provides an accurate comparison between the two or different LED chips. Again, if you'd rather not go over the whole sheet together, I can understand that. Skip ahead to the conclusion part in the video. There I'll tell you what's best to use for what project and other recommendations and conclusions. Again, jump links in the description, go click there if you want to skip this part. Okay, the real tests. First up, idle usage with all LEDs connected but turned off. All 5 volt strip use about the same amount of power, only varying about 1 watt between them. But the 12 volt WS2815 clearly sips more power while idle, almost double from what the same amount of WS2812B Eco chips use. Next up, let's take a look at single color tests both at 100% and 50%. Here we can see that the 12 volt WS2815 is clearly using the most power for all colors. We'll dive deeper into this and why this is in the conclusion part of the video, so we can get through the tests. Continuing with the other high power use contender, APA 102. It's using noticeably more power than the other 5 volt strips. This isn't because it's an inefficient strip like the 12 volt strip, but because it's just outputting a lot more light. If you want super bright color LED strip, this is it. But no, this isn't conclusion time. Let's continue. On the other end of the spectrum, we see that WS2812B, WS2812B Eco, and SK6812 use about the same power for red and green. SK6812 seems to be a little bit more power efficient per color, but not by much. There is, however, a pretty big difference for blue light. The WS2812B Eco variant seems to use a lot less power to shine, well, its blue diode. They are probably using some kind of new blue diode, which is much more efficient versus what they had in their original WS2812B chips. Moving on to full RGB white, so that's the red, green, and blue channel at 100% output altogether, things change slightly. Now, the WS2815 is actually pretty efficient when compared to the 5 volt variants. Here it turns out that the WS2812B is actually less efficient when compared to the SK6812 or WS2815. I can see why the Eco variant was created, bringing power usage back in line with the rest of the chips basically. APA 102 on the other end is again a beacon of blinding light and uses an amazing 88 watts of power. That's like 16 amps, so trust me, the difference is quite visible in reality. The photos don't really do it justice. Next up, we're testing dedicated white. Currently in the sheet, it's only the SK6812 which can do this, and it uses a decent amount of power doing so. While the SK6812 uses about 21 watt per color, the dedicated white channel uses 35 watt. Most likely, this is because the white part of the chip is just basically bigger than the color parts to fit in, well, a bigger LED diode. Another test only the SK6812 can do is light up the strip in full RGB white and also run the dedicated white channel at the same time. It's not really intended for this, and the chips get quite hot, but it also used an impressive 76 watts of power. Although light output certainly went up, APA 102 is still king in regards to total light output. Fine, single colors aside, let's move on to some test patterns. That's basically why you got these digitally addressable LEDs, so yeah. The initial impressions seen in the previous results we just discussed are basically repeated here. WS2815 needs to burn off a lot of its power, so basically uses full power all the time. And since this test pattern has a good amount of blue light in it, WS2812B is least efficient, then followed by SK6812, and then the WS2812B Eco is the most efficient. APA 102 again uses a lot of power but produces enough light to make your neighbors think the police are actually here. So, well, it has that going for it. Dimming these same patterns down to about 50%, we see all LEDs reduce in power consumption, including the 12-volt WS2815 strip. Efficiency remains roughly the same for all contenders compared to their 100% results. Okay, moving on to another effect, everything again is pretty much repeated. What stands out most is that the WS2812B Eco is really a lot more efficient, especially at 50% brightness and even when compared to relatively new chips like the SK6812. The last effect I've tested is the rainbow effect. I mean, rainbow barf is everywhere nowadays in all kinds of PCs and fans and stuff like that, so it's really popular. Here, again, the 12-volt WS2815 needs to burn off a lot of power and actually uses more than the APA 102, while that one was certainly a lot brighter. On the other end of the spectrum, WS2812B Eco is showing its strength again in using as little power as possible. So, let's do some quick conclusions and then move on to the recommendations. First, let's look at the 12-volt WS2815 problem. This problem is immediately apparent if you look at the sheet and especially the several single color tests. And that basically is that although you can feed them with 12 volt, they need an internal voltage drop. So even if you only run the red channel, for instance, the blue and the green still need to drop the voltage for the red channel to run. So instead of sending the power to a visible diode with a color, as you know, an LED, they run it basically through a blind diode, which doesn't produce any light, but still consumes the power, so they get the same voltage to the right LEDs. So that's why it basically uses the same amount of power if you just run red, or if you run red, green, and blue to create white. Well, it just needs to dissipate that power somehow. So that is a thing to consider, but we'll talk about more about that in the recommendations. Moving on to some other conclusions, SK6812 has a unique property. It's the only chip in the test which has 4 channels instead of 3. That means it has a dedicated white light channel you can use in your projects. It's basically the only contender that has that right now. Now, this white light isn't great. For instance, the CRI value isn't stated, so I assume it's below 80 from what I see. But I'll have a dedicated video soon about white light and what to watch out for. Moving on to another conclusion is that the Eco variant of the WS2812B is actually more efficient than all the other LEDs tested today. Looking at the stats for the effects, we can see it uses the least amount of power of all the strips. So, we've finally arrived at the recommendations, so let's see what I'd advise, basically. Now, for a general LED project, I'd basically recommend 5-volt SK6812. This is a great chip, pretty efficient, well-made strips, and it offers you the benefit of being able to use the dedicated white channel to get some more different effects than just with RGB. They even offer a WWA variant with only white addressable LEDs. It has cold white, warm white, and amber, which you can all, addressably use. I made a video about those a little while back. Check it out, I think it's over here. Yeah, there. But as I stated before, even that WWA strip, the white light isn't the best out there. It's not high CRI or something like that, but it can be very interesting to create a different effect than using RGB. The downsides are really its price. SK6812 will cost you about $35 for a 5 meter strip with 60 LEDs per meter, where the same strip with 60 LEDs per meter, the WS2812 will only cost you about $20, so that's a good $15 cheaper. And the Eco variant is even less with $15. So, are you just putting up some fun lights? Maybe just go for the cheapest option and get some WS2812B or the Eco variant. Is it a bit more important project and do you like having the fourth channel with the dedicated white light? SK6812 is definitely the way to go. Now, there are specific use cases. For instance, are you doing a battery-based project where battery life is important? The 5V WS2812B Eco, hands down, best contender. It uses a lot less power than the others and has about the same brightness while doing so. And last, are you doing a project which requires a lot of light output or persistence of vision, which basically means your LEDs will be moving? APA 102 is your chip. It produces a ton of light. It's absolutely blinding. Make sure to cool it with an aluminium profile because they'll burn up like no other. And it has the highest PWM frequency of all the strips out there, making it very suitable for video work, for instance, where at certain shutter speeds you would see PWM interference with the other chips. And last is the 12V WS2815. Although it didn't do too well in the tests, there is still a place for this chip. If you're doing a project where it's going to be impossible to use a lot of power injection wires along with the strip, the 12V of the WS2815 can be of use there. Remember, I used 3 injection points at the beginning, middle and end to make sure all the LEDs were always fed with the amount of power they required. But that can be a hassle, and well, with the 12V, you have more room to play with. So, although it's less efficient, that can be an important factor. And, well, that kind of concludes the video. For now. I will keep testing different variants of LED chips whenever I can get my hands on them and add them to the sheet. If I find something really special, I'll also make another video about it. So, if you want to subscribe for that, that'd be very nice. Again, links to all the strips used will be in the description, and those are our affiliate links, so help me out greatly doing these tests. I bought all of this strip myself, no sponsoring here, and check out quinled.info for lots more information about LEDs and my custom controllers I showed you. If you want to get into LEDs and you don't mind soldering or buying a pre-assembled board when they're available, this combined with the WLED software I've talked about here in this video, it just makes things so easy, and it's a very nice combination. Go watch that video. Other than that, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you guys back in the next video. Bye bye.